So before we head into the short presentations for each of the panelists, I'd just like to introduce each of them. So first we have Dan Calladine, Head of Media Futures at Carat Global Management. Dan has worked with the media industry for over 12 years, tracking online and offline media trends and effectiveness. He's been interviewed in the news media, including BBC Radio 4, Financial Times, Campaign and Guardian. He's an expert on social media and social media tracking. He's also a keen user, being active on YouTube, Twitter and Pinterest. He also runs the site London Pop-Ups, the essential guide to pop-up shops and restaurants and short-term events in London. Then we have Dara Nasr, Head of YouTube and Display Sales at Google. Dara has been at Google for the last 4 years, initially in the agency sales team, but for the past 18 months has been the nascent YouTube and display team heading up agency sales. The key focus has been introducing new formats to the market, including the YouTube masthead and the TrueView user-facing products. Prior to Google, he worked for 8 years in TV advertising at FlexTech Television and Eurosport. And outside of work, he has a wife, 2 daughters, lives in Beaconsfield and enjoys golf, apparently average at playing, great at watching. So then we have our creative guru for the day, Martin Talks, President of Digital of DraftFCB UK and Global Digital Lead. Martin founded Blue Barracuda in 2001 and spearheaded the growth of the agency to over 60 staff based in London and Tallinn, producing award-winning work for over 40 leading clients, including eBay, TGI Fridays, the UK Film Council, Roche Pharmaceutical and Pizza Hut across digital disciplines. Blue Barracuda was acquired by DraftFCB in May 2011. Before establishing Blue Barracuda, Martin spent several years working in venture capital and was commercial director of dot-com success story ADVFN, which he floated on AIM. Martin has a degree in history from Durham University. He's also a keen cricketer and all-round sportsman, and lives in Hertfordshire with his wife and 3 children, a pig and several chickens. And then finally, Nick Birches, Head of Social Media and Digital Innovation at Zenith. Nick is Global Head of Social Media and Digital Innovation, one of the world's largest global media service agencies and part of the Publicis Group. With 15 years' experience, has worked with a wide number of UK and international clients across a range of channels, and is the author of the new book, Paid, Owned and Earned, Maximising Marketing Returns in a Socially Connected World, now available at all good retail stores. So before we actually head into the panel debate, each panellist will give a short presentation of 10 minutes. First, we have Dan, giving an overview of digital trends and where Isobars clients are moving their budgets. Dan.
Thank you very much. So I've got about 10 minutes worth. I'm going to look at, as you say, the different trends in terms of where the money is going. So I mean, clients are always moving their budget. Media's constantly in a situation of evolution. But at the moment, what we're seeing is specific movement into 4 main areas. One is the whole video ad thing. So that includes pre-rolls, but also video ads within sites. The second one is paid social media. So it's the idea that in addition to using social media in a free, in inverted commas, sort of way, you're also specifically using payment to make sure that what you're doing there is seen by the right sort of people. Then content partnerships, so going through influential publishers and co-creating with them and people that they know. And then finally, inevitably, the whole mobile area. So producing mobile apps, because within Aegis we also have creative agencies, and also buying mobile media so that you can target based on location, or that you can get people to interact on mobile or download apps, that sort of stuff. So going through in order. So pre-rolls and video ads. It's becoming more and more important for clients to get video online, because as you saw from the YouTube graph earlier on, online video is just exploding. I mean, YouTube is almost a second internet, and then there's lots of other ways of using video as well. More and more people have broadband, mobile speeds are getting faster. And so we use innovative formats to put video in front of the right audiences. And there's a quick sort of explanation as to why we do this, and also actually for the other things we're talking about as well. This is a chart that shows cost per incremental reach from buying TV. So when you start off, it's actually the number along the bottom is the level of is the amount of impressions that you're buying. And then along the top, it's the cost per incremental reach point. So when you start off, it's very easy to get reach at a low cost because everybody you're hitting is a new user. But then after a while, you're just getting more frequency and not incremental people. So what we argue is that you get to a point of diminishing marginal returns where you take money away from something like TV, and this could apply for other media as well, and you put it into digital, where you can probably target much more efficiently, and you can target on different sort of criteria. So a sort of, if we are doing this in terms of buying video, then a sort of lay down pattern might be something like this. So what you might do is have a bit of pre-campaign momentum, so put something up on YouTube and other video channels and seed it before you go on TV. So blue is the online video, blue is the sort of pattern of online video views. So it starts building before you're on TV. Then grey is the TV video, which sort of grows up and then sort of tails off as you flight the campaign towards the end of it. And so what we plan to do is to use this sort of thing within this sort of laydown within video, and then at the end you can see with the blue line you're still getting organic results, right to the end, because the video is still there when people are searching for it and people can still find it. So that's the sort of thing that we do with video. And then a couple of specific examples. This is, I won't play this, but you'll get the presentations, and so this is clickable. This is an advert that we did for Adidas in Germany, where the video comes out from the banner and basically is very, very engaging for people when they initiate it as users. And then as a second example, this is something, again, we're doing for Adidas, and this is buying video on a loading screen on the PS1. So it's a pretty unusual media placement. It's the sort of media placement that wouldn't have existed a few years ago. But for Adidas, it's exactly the right sort of audience. And if we can put video in front of them, then it's something that they really value. Okay, so the second thing we're seeing much more budget go into is paid social media. So a lot of people, a lot of brands are creating really good content within social media. But as Facebook say, only about 16%, so just over 1 in 7, actually see an organic post from a brand that they follow on Facebook because their timeline is too busy or because they haven't interacted very much recently. And so an awful lot of stuff can go unseen even by fans of the brand. And ditto for Twitter, except even less, because on Twitter it depends on how many people you follow, but the thing just whizzes past so quickly and it's very easy to miss things. So we help clients by using payment to get more visibility for their content, and it's not about the number of fans you've got, but the fans' engagement with your content. So if we can use if we can use buying techniques through the Facebook platform in terms of sponsor stories and that sort of stuff, then what you're doing is the content which the brand is generating is going to be seen by more people. And the aim is to turn social platforms like Facebook and like Twitter and like YouTube and like LinkedIn into measurable media channels. And then in addition to this, what we also do is we use the Facebook targeting to to go through the Facebook thing. So even if somebody's not following the brand per se, you can still advertise to them based on the sort of interest that they've declared themselves or the sort of demographics that they've declared for themselves. And this is a quick example of something that we've been doing with Nokia, with Twitter, where we've been buying trending topics, and then that's very effective in terms of generating interaction and engagement with the brand, because obviously it just sits at the top of the trending topic all day and people can engage with it, and you work creatively with the content as well within the tweet. Okay, so the third one is content partnerships. So increasingly we're working with publishers, so people like magazine publishers offline and online, to co-create content with them, because what magazines are fantastic at is getting inside the head of their audiences. They know the sort of thing their audiences like, and they're also really, really good at creating content because they survive on people visiting them or buying their products based on the content that they've created. So in many respects, we're partnering with with online magazines to use them as almost as a creative agency to actually advise us on how to create this content and make things which really appeal to the audience. So an example of this, which is currently live, is something we're doing for Swatch at the moment for a new watch called Gent Lacquered. And what we did was we took 9 countries and worked with 2 producers in each of the market. So in the UK, ID is one of them. We use Vice in a couple of markets as well, but we've also been doing stuff in China, where we've been working with local fashion mags there. And we've got people to, they've gone out and recruited celebrities in each of the market to make a film about the areas that they live in. So in the UK, one is Jamal from SBTV, who's talking about Acton. So on this website and on YouTube, you've got this film about Acton produced by Jamal, and that's actually quite different, because nobody was really sort of making films about Acton, but the Acton scene, according to him, is where he's at. But then also you've got the woman who played Lol in This Is England, talking about Soho and making a film about that. And so this sort of content is really good, and then that's replicated across 9 countries on 2 sites per market, and there's a whole competition in terms of who can get the most views, who can get the most votes, and then those magazines, the winning magazines, will be rewarded, and viewers of some of the films will be rewarded as well. So it's a good way of sort of creating online content, but using these people, using the experts, the fashion mags in the local markets, to co-create with us. Again, this is clickable when you get the presentation as well. And then finally, this is clearly the year of mobile, or the 3rd year of mobile, or whatever you think of it. So a couple of examples of things that we've done with mobile for our clients. And again, this is sort of effectively a new category where clients are moving their money. So one is the Bud Ice Cold Index, which won a Revolution Award last Friday. And it was a thing that we made. We made it, and Tribal DDB did a lot of the advertising around it. But it was an application for Ireland, where last summer there was a Bud Ice Cold Index app that was linked to the local weather. So if you were in Cork and you downloaded the app, then you would get vouchers for a pint of Bud Ice Cold based on the temperature in Cork that day. So if it went up to 20 degrees, then you get 50p off. If it went up to 24 degrees, then you'd get the pint for free, and that sort of stuff. And again, I've got there's a video of this which you can watch, a sort of case study video. But this was phenomenally successful in Ireland in terms of making people try Bud Ice Cold for the first time, and actually add it to their repertoire of beers that they consume. They consumed over the course of the summer. So this one's coming back, I think. But it's just a really, really creative use of mobile. And clearly, it's the sort of example where there's no other media that could possibly do this. So, this is the sort of beauty of things like mobile apps, and it's just fantastic location-based targeting. And also direct response, because you're giving people vouchers for things that they can just, walk into a bar and buy. And then finally, we're also doing lots of mobile media. So buying banners on mobile sites and within mobile apps to generate both footfall, downloads of vouchers, downloads of applications. This is something that we did for Asda around the time of the X Factor final last year, where what we were doing was trying to drive downloads of the Asda app, which Asda themselves had made. And so we were involved as media partners, but for this, mobile was clearly the best media to use, because you're specifically asking somebody to download a mobile app. So it's the best media for that. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Dan. So next we have Dara from YouTube at the stage to discuss how to attract and keep audiences entertained.
Hello everyone, how are we today? Excellent, better than I thought it was going to be actually. Okay, look, firstly, a couple of things. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. It's a real privilege, so thank you. And secondly, an apology. for the font. My skills in PowerPoint are not remedial, I promise. It's just the fonts haven't uploaded, so there might be some breaking up as we go along, but hopefully not too much. Yeah, well, also, I'd like to thank actually people who've spoken before. Dan for calling YouTube the second internet, Ellie and Ollie talking Honda and the success of YouTube. They've really done the job for me, so I'm just going to really muck around a bit. So I think what we really want to touch upon today is how online video has really evolved, where it's going, and what we're seeing happening now. So this stat came out probably about 2 or 3 months ago. Every second 1 hour video is uploaded to YouTube, or 60 hours per minute. Okay, so I suppose apart from it being a massive scary number, the question would be, so what, really? We're all uploading video, or people are, whether they're users or broadcasters or publishers or advertisers. But I think it's the numbers that are coupled to that which are probably more telling. In the same amount, in the same period, our views have been going up. So globally, we get 4 billion views per day, which has grown it's just doubled in about the last 18 months. And I think more importantly, people tend to divorce video from social media. Pardon me, maybe not people in this room, but certainly a lot of advertisers have in the past. So what we're actually seeing is that 50% of all videos on YouTube have a social interaction, whether that's a like or a favourite or a comment or a rating or a share, etc. So it's very, very, very much at the heart of social dialogue. Now, I think if we fast forward, currently half of all web traffic is video. Within a year, it's going to be 90%. So what that really means is 90% of the internet pipe will be made up of video. And I suppose why that's important to an extent is, again, the ease of uploading video, which we'll touch upon. But of course, video is very, very heavy when compared to other things on the net. So to give you, so one line of text online weighs, I suppose, 4 kilobytes, and 1 second of video is 1 megabyte. So the more video there is on there, the likes of Cisco really have to improve the kind of real back-end internet power. So this isn't just driven, obviously, by YouTube. It's actually driven by everyone getting involved. If you go back 18 months to, I think it's about August 2010, the News of the World, the once esteemed Sunday newspaper, had 3 massive stories in August. There is Ricky Hatton snorting cocaine in a Manchester hotel, the Pakistani cricket team match-fixing shame, and Rooney prostitute gate 2. Okay, so what was important about those stories is they're obviously hugely sensational, and they all had on the News of the World website some form of video on there. Probably not as exciting as you'd think for the Rooney one, but some form of video on there. Now, the News of the World did more video views within that month across those stories than it did for the rest of the year put together. Now, obviously, the content was exceptional, was sensational, so that's not really a massive surprise. But what it taught them, and what a lot of other publishers have really understood, is that the user doesn't treat online, especially online publishing, the same as it would a hard copy of a newspaper. So what they've really done is evolved their product to make it much richer, to be more different. And you just, I say, fast forward to today and look at some of the iPad apps you can get, Financial Times, The Guardian, it's breathtaking. So it's really about how publishers are embracing video and rich media more broadly to serve the want, I suppose, of the user. So today we've demonstrated the growth. Why is there such growth, I suppose, apart from just uploading? Well, broadband penetration is still growing at about 28 to 30% globally. It's plateaued in the UK and the US, but it's still growing massively, and obviously this helps video consumption. The biggest single driver, and people have touched upon it, Dan's just touched upon it, is mobile. Smartphone take-up is, exponentially quick. There are 800,000 Android devices activated each day. We know that everyone with a smartphone is far more engaged with YouTube or online video than people who don't have one, or even with desktop. So a typical iPhone user will watch up to 5 videos a day and upload 1 video per week. But I think the really interesting play here moving forward is the development and growth of the connected TV. By 2016, they're saying 50% of all of our TVs will be connected. The likes of Ender's Analysis and various other research houses are saying that, well, for the likes of online video to be compared to TV, they have to physically sit on a TV. That's happening now. The 3 biggies in terms of distributors and producers of TV, Samsung, Sony and Panasonic, have all got their connected TVs up and running and have been developing for over a couple of years. Samsung in 2010 shifted 25 million. I don't have the figures for last year, but actually Sam can probably help you on that, working directly with a client. Or maybe not as a face, Wilson. That's right. But it's growing massively, and these apps are all sitting there. And actually, if you want to see how they look, I don't have a screenshot, but youtube.com/leanback will show you what the user interface is on TV. It's different. So really watch this space there. It should be very exciting. I think importantly is that we kind of break our content into 3 distinct tranches. There's user-generated content, which is typically someone uploads something, puts it on there, shares it with their family. This is what people would happily, refer to as a cat on a skateboard, various other things. They do typically involve cats. The polar opposite is premium partner content, which is the likes of BBC, Channel 4, Channel 5, publishers, music, videos, etc. And the tranche in the middle is partner content. That would be people who upload videos regularly. They're typically called vloggers. They upload videos regularly. It's in high quality typically, and they get a lot of views. Now, we don't serve ads against the top tranche, but we do across the bottom 2. And we clear all the content before serving ads there. But if you focus on that middle rung, on the far left-hand side, your left-hand side, is someone called Lauren Luke. Lauren Luke is a Geordie lady. She loves to give tips on how you can look like your favourite celebrities, whether it be Cheryl Cole, Angelina Jolie, etc., etc. She got so many views, she was uploading video all the time, that she was contacted by YouTube and asked if she wanted to monetize her content. She said yes. She's now the makeup artist on This Morning. So it's interesting how these people in their own right are becoming kind of like celebrities. If you look at the same row, the video, kind of the penultimate video along the row with the 2 children, is the very famous and, in my opinion, detestable Charlie Bit My Finger. Now, this is this slight anomaly in this, because that's essentially the only video on that channel which has views. He doesn't regularly upload video or anything like that, the dad of Charlie and his brother. But he has gone on to make hundreds of thousands of pounds, right? Typically for actually having a violent child, right? So I think, the reason I'm, I suppose, so bitter about it is both my daughters are quite docile. But I think, essentially that's the anomaly there. Now, if you think last year, probably one of the most famous bits of video was Fenton the dog. Now, absolutely brilliant. There's a lot of parodies on the back of it, but that wouldn't become monetizable simply because it was shot on a mobile. It's quite grainy, which is more the shame, but that it would be classified as UGC. Now, I think what's very important is the shift in user behaviour. If you look at the top rung, basically start of 2010, that constituted 92% of all our views, the UGC. If you go now to today, or 6 months ago when we last got figures from TubeMogul, that represents 57% of our views. So the bottom 2 have moved from 8 to 43% over the last couple of years. And I think why that's important is, the person said, well, you have more partnership deals, which is absolutely true, but it's actually about the sophistication of the user. I think Ollie mentioned that YouTube is now the 2nd largest search engine in the world after Google. And when Google first acquired YouTube, they spent 18 months to 2 years improving the search functionality. The search functionality used to be absolutely atrocious. It's still not amazing, but it's much better than it used to be. So instead of typically me sending a link, just the typical way of entering YouTube is you get a link and you click on the link and you go through. What happens now is not only does that happen, but more often than not, people go to the homepage and they search for something. And if you search for something, it tends to be of a higher quality than UGC. But it's important to really understand how the sophistication of the user has come across for the last few years. Because of this, we've kind of think that we should really kind of change the user interface that we've been. This is our new homepage, and it's for those of you that can't remember the old one or haven't seen this one, it's different in so much as it personalises it more to you. We try to push people now to be logged in, and the reason we do that is that 50% of all videos viewed on YouTube have been recommended somehow, whether there was a shared link, whether there's been a paid-for recommendation, whether it's after you watch a video, for example, you see related videos, someone clicks on those related videos, and we think that if you are logged in, we can serve you more contextual videos or more relevant videos for you, not adverts but videos that you'd be interested in. You can also link it to all your social other social accounts. So if your friend watches something on Facebook, it'll tell you on your home screen here saying you might like this because your mate did, etc., etc. And I think why that's important is, you can now subscribe to channels which you could before, but they're making a bigger deal of it. You can see that on the left-hand side, and it's like a mini EPG in many ways. So I think for those of you here that are agencies dealing with clients that are interested in this space, the interesting thing to really feed through to, I think, the clients is the value of a subscription now. So when people have a lot of channels, they can be very much lost in the ether. Well, how do you get to that channel? Well, you get driven by pay for advertising typically. How do you return to that channel? Well, if you can get someone to subscribe to that channel, new videos, new news will appear on that person's homepage on YouTube, and they can go back. So typically, don't offer a contest which people don't think they're going to, trip to the moon and back, because people don't think they're going to win that. But if you can offer as an advertiser something as a hook, whether it's a priority, a couple of hours to buy gig tickets, or whether you can offer them 1 day extra within their sale, etc., etc., that will really be quite compelling. Finally, I'm going to go on to our TrueView ad format platform, which is very, very user-facing. Just so you know, I'm not going to focus on these for the interest of time, but the one on the far left-hand side is TrueView InStream, which is more commonly known as skippable ads. They really exist to be, as I say, very user-facing, to really help the client interact with the user. So, for those of you who don't know, you elect a bit of content, an ad comes up, it says you can skip this ad in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 seconds, and then a box says you can skip this ad now, or you can obviously just watch the content. The client will only pay for that ad if all that ad is seen, or the first 30 seconds, whichever comes first. So it's trying to be as relevant, as user focused as possible. It's done on a cost per view, so even if the ad is skipped, there's no real loss, because they haven't lost, you haven't lost any, you haven't been charged for that. And this is more where we're going. I think Google tried to keep the user at the front of their thinking, and this is what this form of advertising does. The final thing I want to touch upon, the second final thing I'm going to touch upon is increased measurement. Everyone's been doing VOD, or a lot of people have been doing VOD or video on demand or pre-roll, call it what you will, for the last few years. And it feels right. Everyone thinks it feels right, but it's time to really validate it. And to that end, we're putting a lot of resource and effort into research. We're setting up a single source panel in the UK to monitor the incremental reach of online and YouTube. And also we've just launched this week something called AdWords for Video, which allows you to track your video campaigns, see what creatives are working, see what's clicking through better, see what formats are better, but more importantly to measure, and this is Nick's arena, the earned views that you're getting. So if you pay for X, you get Y, and an element of that is free, and how much. And this is just like a one-stop shop dashboard for agencies really to understand what metrics are key to their clients and how they can be optimized. The one, I'm going to leave you with a video quickly, but obviously a vast majority of the people here look after big clients, but the great thing about AdWords Video and various other bits of tools you can do, and video in general, is that a lot of companies now are setting up by themselves using video at the forefront and social media at the forefront. And I'm just going to leave you with one video. Greg, if you could play it and put it on full screen, that'd be great. If we could have sound as well, that'd be great. Looks like we might not be able to have sound.
I'm Mike, founder of DollarShaveClub.com. What is DollarShaveClub.com? Well, for $1 a month, we send high-quality razors right to your door. Yeah, $1. Are the blades any good? No. Our blades are f***ing great. Each razor has stainless steel blades, an aloe vera lubricating strip, and a pivot head. It's so gentle a toddler could use it. And do you like spending $20 a month on brand name razors? 19 go to Roger Federer. I'm good at tennis.
And do you think your razor needs a vibrating handle, a flashlight, a back scratcher, and 10 blades? Your handsome-ass grandfather had 1 blade and polio. Looking good, Pop-Up! Stop paying for shave tech you don't need. And stop forgetting to buy your blades every month. Alejandro and I are going to ship them right to you. We're not just selling razors, we're also making new jobs. Alejandro, what were you doing last month?
Not working.
What are you doing now?
Working.
I'm no Vanderbilt, but this train makes hay. So stop forgetting to buy your blades every month and start deciding where you're going to stack all those dollar bills I'm saving you. We are DollarShaveClub.com, and the party is on.
An actual business that this guy set up a few weeks ago. It's got 4.5 million views now. It's got something like 10,000 followers on Twitter, loads of likes on Facebook, and in a very short time he's become a multi-millionaire, the lucky sod. So, you know, all kind of companies are using it. So again, thank you very much for your time. I hope that was of use to you today.
Thank you, Dara. So following Google's world domination, we now have Martin from Draft discussing how digital and engaging with consumers through content is done. Over to you, Martin.
Sure. Right, thanks a lot. Well, when I was given that topic, I thought it's a pretty daunting topic. A big subject to cover in just 10 minutes. And then I looked at the attendee list and I thought, quite tough crowd too, because they seem to know a thing or two about content publication. So I humbly offer you a few suggestions. In fact, a little bit of a formula that we sometimes consider in terms of how you create engaging content for digital. Of course, it's not a formula that can always have amazingly predictable results, because unfortunately consumers can be pretty irrational. So I could have called, as an alternative title, I could have used Storytelling in a Cheeseburger World. Dara made a nice reference to cats earlier. I certainly agree with him. Cats are a big threat to us all, I believe. And the reason for that is because we can produce amazingly expensive and carefully produced content, and it's going to be outgunned by a couple of fluffy cats. You know, there's no logic to that. That's it's a big. Cats are a big challenge. That's my first big challenge. The second challenge is, of course, we're drowning in content. There's an awful, Dara was giving some quotes about how much content there is. There are many, many statistics telling us how much content's being produced now. I think I heard Eric Schmidt say in 48 hours more content is produced than the whole of mankind produced up to 2003. So there's plenty of content. All our content we produce is avoidable. So that's another big challenge. So what do we do? What do we do as content producers or working with content producers? Well, I think we start where content's always really started from, telling great stories and providing entertaining experiences. And I think those entertaining experiences can come in all sorts of formats. Could be an amazing video about razor blades, or a video that some of the Honda things were great as well. I don't know if everyone's heard of Coney 2012. I guess most people will have. By Invisible Children. Whatever you think about the cause and the people behind it, it was an amazingly successful bit of content, sort of 85 million views. I think they got nearly 80 million in 5 days, so incredibly viral content. And why was it so successful? Because it told, I believe, a really, really great story. It had very strong theme, characters, goodies and baddies, all this stuff. It had everything you need for a great story. It also, interesting, just as a point of detail, showed a lot of people sharing it, and was one psychological phenomenon to bear in mind. If you show people, if you tweet about Twitter, you're more likely to get retweeted. It seems to be a bit of a phenomenon. People like to have sharing behavior reaffirmed, so embedding it in your own content can sometimes work. But that's a 30-minute video, which is, I guess, not the average length of video on YouTube. So quite an interesting one, well worth looking at a bit more, I think. But of course we live in a world where the first screen is rapidly becoming the mobile, so it's no longer really the third screen, and it certainly won't be for much longer, our clients experience above 30% access to their content, online content, through a mobile now. So we need to bear in mind people's behaviour when they're using a mobile. We need to create different solutions, different content for different mindsets, if you like. And certainly snackable content's the right way to go for mobile. Sort of content you might watch when you're in a queue or sitting on the toilet as well. Seems to be a big place for smartphone content consumption. So, there we go. And then we get other forms of content that seems to have amazing success. The internet meme is something, bits of content that spread amazingly fast. So I'm sure we all remember Angelina Jolie and her amazing dress. Well, that was just, internet meme gold, isn't it? Because you can add another leg. Hey, why stop at 2? Let's go for 4. And hey, why stop at Angelina Jolie when you can have Bruce Lee with an extra leg? Or, of course, there's going to be a cat. And then, always Star Wars gets in on the act, and if he's getting in on the act, then Darth Maul must do. But the great thing about this is it's incredibly easy to participate in. Any of us can participate in this. This is really easy participation content. I think it begins to tell us a little bit of a shift in content, maybe engagement, in a world where perhaps uploading is becoming important as well as downloading content, and where if we can create content that's just a starting point for other people to take it further. You sort of anticipate how people can take our content and adapt it, such as with simple cases like the internet meme. That can be incredibly successful in terms of engagement. And I think sometimes we ask too much of consumers when we ask them to upload videos, and perhaps are disappointed when they don't upload as many videos as we wanted, despite our offer of a holiday, a car, or money. But perhaps that's too much for them to ask. But these things are really easy to ask for, really easy participation, easy in, easy experience. And I think they hint on another thing. So that was entertaining experiences, part one of the formula. The other part is participation. I guess, one question to ask, would you prefer to see James Bond or be James Bond, is a question I occasionally ask myself in deluded moments. I'm sure many men will be able to relate to that. But obviously being James Bond would be really cool. And it's great for content producers, because the James Bond franchise makes far more money out of games than it does out of its films. You can watch a film for 2 hours, you can play a game for 24 hours, 48 hours, far more engagement. I think that lends itself to another point there about storytelling. It's maybe less storytelling and story collaboration, because these people are part of the story. They're creating their own versions of it within defined rules of the game. So the third bit of an equation I wanted to mention, and one I'm very keen on particularly, is this idea of utility as well. I don't know if anyone's heard of Gary Vaynerchuk. He is a guy in America who took over, or got involved in his family liquor store. So he had a liquor store. In 5 years, he made it into a $50 million business, wine business. A bit like our Razor Man, I guess. He had amazing success through producing content. Produced a lot of podcasts, but he also went out on Twitter and just answered anyone who asked any question about wine. He'd just answer it. Not particularly linking to anyone, not particularly promoting his liquor store, just because he could. And he gained this massive following, and now he's sort of a bit of a media celebrity over in America. But he was offering, the reason he was successful was not because he kept on banging on about his liquor store and what great wine it sold, but because he provided so useful service. And I think brands like Nike have gone a long way down that road with the way, that's the fuel band that they've got, which allows you to track where you run. You can join in with other people runners, you can connect with them, and now they're opening up the API, particularly for music collaboration, so you'll be able to run with personalized music depending on the weather or your mood or whoever you are. So that's quite an interesting way that they're going, opening up an API to their brand effectively. We had a little bit of experience of this as well with the film industry. They came to us with a problem. How do we stop people illegally downloading film content? Tough brief, of course. And what they've been doing to date was telling people to stop and stop being naughty, basically. You wouldn't rob a granny, you wouldn't steal a car. If you remember those cinema adverts, you're sitting in the cinema and you've already bought a ticket. Yeah, doesn't feel quite right, does it? So we decided we'd build something useful for people. So this is a site, findanyfilm.com, now run by the BFI. But you literally put in any film, Groundhog Day or whatever it might be, and it will tell you exactly how to watch it, from TV to DVD, Blu-ray, cinema, online formats. We made it really easy for people to find legal content. with the theory that easy beats free, in the sense if you make it really easy for people to get it, they'll probably just do it. It's not a huge amount of money. So it's just a useful service, and that has gained a lot of popularity and success for them in terms of getting their message across. So the other final point, I suppose, in terms of the formula would be relevance. I'm thinking, I know it's an international interest here as well. You know, across Europe and Middle East, they're going to, well, in that particular map, there's going to be different, a high level, different cultural references. So the lady from Honda, Ellie, was talking about how perhaps Germany was more interested in the technical details and Spain was more involved in emotional content. There are different things at that level. There are different things in language. So when we're helping people to organise their international Facebook presences, we go through the debate on whether they should have global content, local content, or indeed local content, to use a horrible word. What's the balance? What's the right balance? Local content gets about 30 times more engagement than global content in our experience, so there's a good case for getting a good chunk of local content in there. So relevance can go right the way down, of course, to a much more personal level as well. And all other things people are saying about that sort of illustrate that as well. So what's the formula that you could use? It's something like this. It's entertaining experiences plus participation plus utility that's relevant. And what does that give you? It gives you digital engagement, but unfortunately it can be digital engagement for a very short period of time, because content on digital, half-life of digital content is pretty short. So what do we do about that? I think we just have to produce a lot of content, to be honest. I think that's one of the answers, and I think that's a big challenge for all businesses to gear up to producing a lot of content, including my own business. You know, we need to gear up to producing a lot more content, and that requires investment. But I think that's a challenge that we need to meet. And I also think in doing that, we don't necessarily need to do it alone, because I think if we do it in a collaborative way, we do it with publishers, we do it with our own staff, which are often forgotten resource. Often, we've got over 10,000 employees. They're all potential publishers for us. They can all produce content. And of course, do it with our consumers, creating that more collaborative approach. Make it easy for them to take the content on to help us create entertaining experiences that are relevant, because they involve participation and usefulness. And I think it's worth trying things. You know, we're trying things and seeing what works and what doesn't work, to be honest, and the new metrics that are available are always going to be useful. I don't think we've really sorted out engagement metrics. I think generally people talk a lot of nonsense about what engagement means. It can mean so many things. But one of the metrics one might want to talk about is influence. Again, I think Honda were talking about that as one of the ways they're measuring their success, creating influence scores. So I think overall, in summary, I think the game for content production, as far as we're concerned with our clients, is we need to move away from creating this one uber bit of content we can bowl our consumers over with, perhaps to a bit more of a situation where we're knocking content between ourselves, between our consumers, a bit more agile, a few more balls in the game, and that'll help us create those entertaining experiences that people can participate in and find useful, that are relevant. Thank you very much.
So before we move to the panel debate, I'd like to welcome Nick to the stage from Zenith to talk about paid, owned and earned, and his view on how and where to engage in the importance of social media.
So, good morning everyone. I'm Nick Bircher from Zenith. And for those of you who don't know us, we're a global media services organisation. So we've got over 200 offices around the world. We do strategic planning, we do media buying, we have an econometrics and measurement division. We also have specialist units, so we have Performix for performance marketing, and we have Newcast, where it's primarily content and social and those emerging areas. And what I've done, my job is to coordinate across a lot of that, to work with some of our global clients and to work with our account teams. So if we can play, thank you.
This is what we have to go on, all right? Wait a minute.
What are you thinking?
Maybe we'll get lucky. After digging through hundreds of surveillance videos, it was just too blurry to make an exact match. Maybe now? Bingo. That's who we're looking for. Damn, I'm good. Let's go.
So David Hasselhoff. What was that for? Any thoughts? Who thinks that was for a car? Telecom? Tech? It was for a shopping centre in Oslo. So they produced this video piece where you could go on, you could engage with it and upload, give it permission to connect to your Facebook or your location or any number of different things. So it's around 2 minutes, but it basically pulls in your Facebook photos, it puts Google Street View and maps in there, it puts all sorts of different bits and shows you David Hasselhoff talking about you all the way from the bit in the office through to arriving at the shopping centre where he's arm in arm around you and you kind of get the whole shopping centre experience come to life. So this is a really different way of doing things. I'm sitting here and I'm engaging with something that's been created in Oslo and I'm sharing it. And where do you start thinking about all of these things? Well, I think you actually need some structure. So first of all, you've got to start thinking about the audience. So I've got cats again. And the point here for me is you've got two types of audience. You've got the sit back and receive audience, which I think most of you kind of demonstrated that you're in that frame of mind currently. And you've also got the lean forward audience, the people who want to lean forward, create things, search things out, engage with things. And they're doing that across a whole range of different devices. So we've got to think about everything we're doing. We have to think about these two different groups that we're targeting. And the really interesting ones when it comes to content or relationship marketing or social, obviously the active ones. The more people we can get active, the more people we can get talking and participating with our brand, the more potential there is in this space. So I think this comes together in the world of paid, owned, earned. So this is a concept that's been around for probably a couple of years now. But it's the idea that paid media, so traditionally TV ads, more recently things like Google ads or Facebook ads or YouTube ads, sits on the left. In the middle you have owned. You have websites traditionally, you have microsites. You also now have apps, you have Facebook pages, you have Google Plus pages and YouTube channels and things of that nature. One of the pieces that I think get overlooked is product is actually an owned piece. So there's a blank can in the bottom corner, but anything can be owned media now. It's not just media, but it could be the store, it could be product, it could be anything. And then the last box is, or the last circle is around earned. So this is something where traditionally it was around blogs and forums. More and more that becomes around Twitter, it becomes around the newer things like Pinterest or even the TV check-in apps. But the interesting thing for me is the fact that all of this is linked together. Actually, paid can have an impact on how many people interact with your content. Paid can have an impact on how many people talk about your content. People talking about your content may actually have an impact on your paid activity. Because, for example, in a search engine, if there are lots of negative natural search results, I think people are less likely to click on your paid advertising on the search engine. The flip is also true. So everything works together. And kind of central to this is this idea of owned and content. Content fulfills paid advertising. Content can get people talking about things. And content can also start triggering insights, you can start collecting data, you can start collecting lots of different things. But it's not as simple as that. I think we need to split things out. So actually, on the right-hand side, campaigns, that's where people have traditionally been. The 2-week burst in the run-up to Christmas, the 2-week burst in the run-up to new car registration. It's always been about campaigns, with TV advertising and things like that. Content, you see big content initiatives around key areas. Again, a lot of that's based around a campaign. And that hasn't gone away. I think campaigns, it kind of brings paid, owned, earned together. You've got to think about optimization and measurement all the time within that. You've got to be more live than ever before. And a campaign will fulfill specific goals or objectives. It will still do that. The objective of a campaign, increase sales, increase awareness. But what we've also got to think about, and it's been mentioned a few times today by different people, is this idea of always on. So on the left-hand side, we've got always on channels. We have customer service channels, we have Twitter accounts, we have Facebook pages, and they're always on. So when we run a campaign nowadays, we need to think about how that will fulfill specific goals and objectives, but we also need to think about how that will charge up the always-on hub. Having TV advertising may well increase sales in the short term, but it may well increase Facebook fans in the short term too. So how do we get the balance? How do we think about this? How do we plan across all of this? Well, there's an infographic or image that Yahoo put together last year, and they called it the paid owned earned love story. So the idea is it's about thinking about relationships. So if you just take a second to think about your partner, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife. That first time when you met, the eyes across the crowded bar, the eyes across a crowded office, whatever it might be. If you compare how your relationship was then at that point in time to how your relationship may be now, a few years down the line, think of the different stages that you've had to go through to get to where you now are currently. And that's what you need to think about with this. Dara touched on the idea of collecting subscribers. It's not just about that first impact, it's about subscribers and subscriptions. And that's what this graphic was all about. So it's how you think about paid owned earned from the point of view of the first moment. What's your name? What do you do? Can you tell me more about yourself? You've then got the piece, do I want to spend more time with you? Let's get deep. Let's see if you can keep me interested. And as it goes along, you get more and more involved, and it's time to introduce you to my people, my friends, my parents, etc. And then you've got this ongoing piece where you've got to keep the relationship alive. It's a long-term thing, not a short-term thing, hopefully. And I think once you've got that kind of thinking in your head, you've got the different stages where you can start thinking about how you execute your marketing, how you execute your content initiatives. Are you aiming for a one-night stand? Are you aiming to sustain something that's already ongoing, etc., etc.? So when you start thinking about content, you've got different ways that content works. So first of all, content fulfills searches. So through the search engine, your active audience go there, they want to find something. Are they going to find what you want them to, or are they going to find something else? Content can meet that need. Content can act as Facebook fuel too. So Facebook isn't just about advertising and one-off hits. It's about this relationship. It's about bringing things to life. But you need fuel to keep that going, and content can fulfill there as well. And I think this gets really interesting now when you start to see some of the data coming out. So The Guardian a few weeks ago presented the fact that since they launched a Facebook app, one of the embedded Facebook apps, the new ones, towards the end of last year, their traffic from Facebook has increased enormously. So it was something where in the past they always relied on Google as a really key source of people coming in to find their stories. February this year, the Guardian news website got more traffic from Facebook than it got from Google. And that's through people sharing, using the app, and the kind of inbuilt virality and referrals from friends. So this is something that they presented at a conference a few weeks back, and I thought this was fascinating to see how the world of Google and how the world of Facebook are kind of colliding and combining. So when we start to operate in this world, when we start to think about the sharing side of things, we need to start getting inside people's heads. We need to start understanding why they would do something. So you start thinking about behaviors. And the New York Times produced a big piece of research last year. So you can Google this, it's available, the whole document. If you search for New York Times or psychology of sharing, you can find the whole piece. I tend to use this summary slide. So there were 5 reasons they found about why people would care about your content and why they would share your content. So number 1 is to bring valuable and entertaining content to others. I thought this was funny, I thought I should share it. I thought this was entertaining, I'll share it with people. But then it gets more interesting, it's to define ourselves to others. So if in the past people would say or talk about the idea of, I think, therefore I am, perhaps now we're heading to a world where it's, I share, therefore I am. What I share with people, what I do online, is me trying to say something about myself. Whether I like it or not, it defines me in the eyes of others. You've got number 3, the nourishing relationships. The idea of Christmas card lists. That once a year you haven't spoken to these people for a long time, but the Christmas card gives you an excuse to get back in touch, to kind of say, hello, remember me, how are you doing? Well, that's what sharing a link through these social platforms, a lot of that's about. It's the idea that you can nourish a relationship, you can kind of expand your friendship and your connection by sharing things. Self-fulfillment, it gives me something to do. I want to be famous, I want to feel good about myself, whatever that might be. And then you've got the last piece, to get the word out about causes or brands. So if you've had a great brand experience, if someone's really looked after you, if you really like the new TV ad, you may want to just share that with people because you think it deserves a wider audience. People need to know about this. So you start thinking about different ways that you can produce content to tick those boxes. Is it entertainment? Is it education, helping people to do things? Is it the utility we spoke about earlier, the being useful and just being there for people? Well, I think there are three things that I'll just show you before we go through, before we kind of conclude this piece. So the first stuff is content can be simple. So when you're talking about particularly things like Facebook content, it doesn't always have to be massively kind of produced Hollywood production pieces. It could just be simple links, simple comments, simple kind of photos. So the idea of conversation calendars comes in here, the idea of communicating things on a daily basis, having an always-on dialogue. That can really help you get engagement and maintain engagement for when you've got something big to say. So this is something I took from the Bayern Munich Facebook page. I was just scanning back over what they were doing. Don't ask me why. But I found this. It was just a simple image talking about true love. That was all they posted. 47,700 likes. And that's the sort of thing you see. It's not always the big content that gets engagement. It could be the little things that just keep going. But the things that really touch a nerve with people. The things that speak to the 5 reasons we were talking about why people share. So it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be simple. It can be personal and more involved. So this is something, a lot of people talk about buzz and social presentations. So this is me trying to do that, but slightly differently. So this is Buzz Lightyear, and this is from the Disneyland ride, the Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters. So I've censored it slightly, but this is me on there with my score. And what you actually have with this ride, it's fantastic. So first of all, they've thought of, the ride is an owned media property. So it's nothing to do with TV or the internet, it's the ride itself. That's what's going to create the engagement. And when you finish the ride, you're offered a photo of you being on the ride with your score and the person you're with. But instead of selling it to you, as traditionally a theme park would try to, it offers it to you for free. There are banks of screens when you finish the ride, and you can go up and select your photo. You can then email your photo to yourself or a friend. And when that email arrives, it's got the image, and then at the bottom it's got the piece that makes it very easy to share. Click here to share with Facebook. So what they're doing, they're turning the experience that you're having on that ride, a great thing that you're kind of feeling. They're encouraging you to share that with a social platform, so they're driving earned media impressions. But at the same point, they're also capturing your email address. They're also opening the opportunity for future relationship marketing and future things that they can do with you. And then the last thing I wanted to show you was an example of big content. So with the Super Bowl this year, we had a Viva Key collaboration. So Zenith and our social agency in New York, Big Fuel, we worked together to bring H&M's Super Bowl campaign to life. So we had a TV ad, which was the opening point for things, that had a hashtag that drove to social. It gives me an excuse to show you the TV ad now, so if we click play.
Baby, do you understand me now? Yes, sometimes I seem a little mad. But don't you know that no life can always be an angel? And when things go wrong, I seem a little mad. But I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood.
So David Beckham, underwear range for H&M. So the TV ad finishes with hm.com, the website, but it also has a hashtag on there, Beckham for HM. So what you found with Super Bowl, lots of people were talking. When they see the ads, there's just this inbuilt tradition of talk about the ads and share the ads with people. We were trying to encourage people to talk about our ad on Twitter and other platforms. We had the hashtag at the end of it. So American football, a British football player, he was the #1 topic of conversation throughout the Super Bowl this year. So massive success for the team involved and also for sales afterwards. So in summary, I think there are different ways of doing it, so hopefully I've given you a few ideas, but it's the idea that content can extend paid media. So you have your TV ad, you can have content that sits behind it to make it work harder for you. Content can sustain relationships, so you can keep that relationship going, you can keep the love alive. And it can also charge up the owned media hubs. So it can boost engagement levels, it can boost the fan base, it can drive the subscribers. And finally, if you've got content that people really care about, you can get them driving earned media for you. You can get them talking about your brand, you can get them sharing things. And if you really bring people in, you can start turning people from liking your brand to loving your brand and really driving the advocacy part as well. So that's it for my section. Thank you for listening. And if you want to follow us on Twitter or purchase a book perhaps, it's all there for you. Thank you.
So from Beckham stalking to moving on to the business end of the day and our panel debate, I'd like to encourage you, if you do have a question, so just raise your hand and we'll find the microphone to you. And we've got a couple of prefab questions here to kick things off, but actually if the gentleman in the back has the first question, please address the panel.
Traditionally, we have sort of 30-second ads, and a lot of my entertainment clients will sort of repurpose that from their television ads. With the TrueView format, obviously gives you a lot more creative license and longer times. And I've seen sort of music distributors actually pushing their full music video on TrueView, which is 3 to 4 minutes long. Pushing sort of longer content instead of just the traditional 30 seconds, is that necessarily a good thing? And you see more clients actually do that?
No. I think it's not necessarily a good thing. I mean, I think we'd never recommend doing 3-4 minute snippets of all content. I mean, the reason we brought on TrueView, or one of the reasons we brought on TrueView, when we first launched YouTube on pre-roll on YouTube, we would do often what other broadcasters do, i.e. have 2, 3, 4, 5 ads throughout a piece of content, and we found the feedback to be awful. I think if you hark to days gone by of maybe your grandparents or great grandparents, they thought commercial TV was wrong. They'd be very much BBC, and I think we've grown up with commercial TV. We're used to ads, we accept the ads. It's not a problem. I think when the advent of the internet and video on the internet, the users weren't as happy to accept them at the beginning. So we basically cut down. We only have one pre-roll now. But that said, fast forwarding to the whole TrueView space, is that we find that actually the shorter the ad will probably perform better in terms of a view-through rate, which was pretty obvious. A 10-second ad is more likely to be watched than a 30, 40-second ad. But again, it's on the quality of content. There was a gaming manufacturer, a famous one, that had an 82-second ad, and it bought a load of TrueView. 90% of the ads were skipped, so they only, basically only 10% of the placements were viewed through until the end. But they didn't care because they were only paying for those 10%, and actually the click-through rate and the conversion rate of the 10% that did watch it were phenomenally high. So I don't think there's a formula for this, but we certainly don't recommend massively long form ads. If the content is relevant and the targeting is relevant, then play around with it, but don't focus on just whacking a load of content in and forcing people to watch it.
So we talked today about the benefits of sharing content, but rights are becoming an increasingly important area. How can content owners safeguard their IP when it's their own consumers who are sharing the content? If I could direct that question firstly at Martin.
To me? Oh, crikey. Always a good one. Well, I did read something just the other day, I think it might be yesterday, where digital rights management's been taken out of certain content by, is it the Harry Potter website? Potter something? Pottermore. They've removed that, and there's another science fiction publisher who's just done the same, because what they're saying is that people buy content and they can't view it on all devices. They're making their legal purchases sort of acting almost illegally. So they're saying they're sort of giving up a bit of that control, I think, as opposed to others, maybe who are much more harsh on where people can view it and how people view it. But I think the success of that we will see over time how that plays out. It's almost like behind the paywall or not behind the paywall. So. But I mean, my personal view is, as you saw from the content presentation, is that I think if we can create content that other people can take and develop, and they'll create better stories than we perhaps could ever think of, and certainly in greater volumes than we could ever afford to produce. So I think as much as possible, it's good to embrace that. I think you need to do it in a way where it still ladders up to your brand story, your brand narrative, and keeping that brand narrative going and it not going off in all sort of crazy directions. That's not necessarily easy, but it's one of those things I think we all have to experiment with and find out.
And Dan, what are your thoughts on the subject, and how do you reassure your clients?
I think like Martin said, you have to let the audience sort of own the brand to a degree, because I think there's an increasing view that if you like a brand, then you own it as well. I mean, and the audience defines the brand in many ways. One of our clients is Lego, and there's millions of pictures on Flickr of people that have made things with Lego. They've recreated famous photos. They've done sort of silly Christmas pictures and things like that. And likewise, the Eddie Izzard Darth Vader Star Wars Canteen thing on YouTube. I mean, the other thing, I remember a few years ago we did one of the first ever video ads as a takeover on MSN, and they didn't have the rights. Well, they had the rights for the video to be shown on the internet, but it had to be protected in such a way that nobody could download it and re-upload it and do things with it, and we had to do quite a lot of work with that. But I think the contracts now reflect the fact, with the creators, reflect the fact that people are going to rip it and make new copies and re-upload it and things. And you do get issues. I think with alcohol companies you get a lot of issues because they have to show that where their content is available, it can only be seen by people of a certain age. And you can do that when you own the content, when you own where you've uploaded it. But when people are ripping it and re-uploading it, then you can't really own that. So that can be a legal issue.
I want just a little thought to add that on Lego as well. Lego have got this site that they developed in Japan, Kusu, which I think is an interesting idea. Well, they've taken this idea of collaboration actually to their business as well. People can upload these things, like Dan's saying, and they can upload new models of Lego, and if they get enough favourable votes, then Lego will make it and do a revenue share with them, which is sort of taking that principle of sharing and collaboration right the way through to the actual business, so making it a social business, not just a social marketing company, if you know what I mean. It's interesting.
Very interesting. So linking on from that, which brands are really taking full advantage of the sharing landscape and really embracing that? And if Dara could take that question, particularly being a content owner of video.
I think if you look at the brand space, it really depends what they want to achieve. I think the thing about the whole social media space is that it's becoming or it is almost like a dark art, to it. But actually, I think the first question is what's the strategy? There's something like 35 different KPIs within whether it be a viewer, share, etc., etc. It really depends what you want to do with that with your campaign. Now, certain people doing things well are, I believe that Foster's have done some exceptional things. I think, obviously, I would bang on about video, but I think with what Foster's did is that they decided that they wanted to own the comedy space. They thought, they did a load of research, finding that actually young males relate more to comedy than they do sport. They do various other things, so they really got heavily involved in that. And actually, they realised there almost wasn't enough comedy space for them to own. So they did Edinburgh, sponsored Edinburgh Festival, they sponsored a lot on Channel 4. So what they've actually started doing is, they developed their own site, Foster's Funny, they put it on YouTube as well, and they did webisodes of original comedy, but not just any old, some bloke you don't know chatting. They got, did an Alan Partridge, I think 10-part series called Mid-Morning Matters. They relaunched Reeves and Mortimer with Afternoon Delights. They've done stuff with the Fast Show guys, I believe. And what's actually happened is that it did so well in terms of views and people interacting with it, sharing it, that the Alan Partridge got voted for a South Bank Award, and they're looking to commission that and bring it to TV, which is, so I think that we have to understand that, the web and the user, is working in a very particular way, and in a very beautiful way of how it's collaborating with broader media. So I think they've done very well. So that's my one example there, but there are countless.
And Nick, from your experience working with your client base, who do you think is doing it particularly well?
So I think just more following up from Dara, I think there's a point to be made where if we have 60 hours of video going to YouTube every minute, and all of this sharing and all of this content out there, then the idea that all you need to do is make something nice and fulfill kind of behaviours or objectives, and then it will get hundreds and thousands of views and things like that. I think we've got to be more realistic about things and realise that actually the things people talk about and the things people share and the things that seem to have success are actually the ones that have had media spend pushing them to critical mass as well. So whether that's promoted videos on YouTube, whether it's kind of seeding strategies and paid for seeding, whether it's any number of the different things that drive to initial critical mass are the things that we need to be thinking about. So sharing is often the byproduct of great content, yes, great product experience, yes, but even more than that, it's the fact that paid media has driven it. And if you look at the solutions that are coming through now, so you've got Facebook sponsored stories, the Facebook reach generator, the sponsored tweets you can do. That's all about trying to highlight things that are happening and trying to just put it above that parapet so people can actually see things and see what's happening and stuff. And I think that's the really interesting area, is how paid is driving everything else. So it's not enough to make something great, you've got to think about the strategy for how you're going to drive it and how you're going to amplify it.
Absolutely. Are there any questions from the floor? Yes, please.
Hi, Astrid Gillincrook from CNN. Nick, you just touched on it, and Martin, you talked before about understanding the psychology of sharing. Obviously, sharing the content is one of the key objectives with a brand, and research shows that shared content has high engagement and high ad recall. I guess my question is, what would you say really makes content shareable? And you think understanding what makes content shareable opens up to a new way of targeting and a new way of ad placements?
So I think the first answer to that is you've got two things for content. So one is search engine optimization, reputation management, all of that side of things. You've got to think about search as a content piece, first of all. Secondly, if you're looking towards the sharing bit, then you've got to think about the behaviours, those 5 things that we touched on earlier, but you've also got to give people reasons. So quite often you've got to prompt people. So the reason I like the Buzz Lightyear example I showed you earlier is the fact that it doesn't just make it easier to share, but it prompts you to share it. So those sort of things of just simply asking someone, whether it's a Facebook post and you put a question on the end of it, so here is a statement, what do you think? That encourages participation, that encourages people to do things. I booked a hotel at Easter. As soon as I clicked the booking button, it just flashed up with, thank you for your booking, we're excited that you're coming to stay with us. Would you like to tell your friends on Facebook about it? Click here to share. So I think you've got to think about all these different things. So it's how you set things up to start with, and then how you optimize the experience to not only be a great experience, but to make it very easy to share and kind of encourage people to do so as well.
Maybe one thought to add to that. One thing I found quite interesting recently is looking at, in terms of the psychology of where you try and create content that is shareable, what's the right point, say if you're selling something. And a lot of people focus on the front part before people actually get to purchase. Actually, one of the most powerful bits is after people have bought, because the reason we buy, we think we're terribly rational, but 95% of purchase decisions are driven by emotional side of the brain and only 5% by the rational side. So we tend to buy on emotion. When we bought, we have to justify what we bought. So we have to, it's like try, buy, alibi. It's a sort of route here. So you have to say, well, the reason I bought this is for all these terribly good rational reasons. So that's the moment when people are really prepared to sort of share and say, hey, it was a great idea. And it gives people a real, it's not just a rational reaction to having bought something, it's an emotional and physical reaction. People actually get a bit of a dopamine rush for actually sharing the fact that I bought this and it was really great. Wasn't that a good decision? Please tell me it was a good decision. But people really search for that. So I think in terms of moments of sharing as well, often post-purchase is a great moment to focus on.
I think the other piece, there was some Facebook research that got published probably about 18 months ago, talking about what actually works in terms of engaging fans, engaging users on the platform. And they kind of bracketed it into 4 areas. So the first one they spoke about was touching or emotional stories. So really powerful things where people want to get involved and comment. The second one was passionate and provocative debates. So being controversial or trying to encourage illicit response gets people responding. There was something about asking simple questions, so as I said, framing things with a question. And then the last thing was being relevant. So being able to talk about things like sports results or the weather or whatever day it is at the moment. Is it April Fool's Day? Is it a national holiday, a royal wedding, anything like that? And being kind of relevant to the conversation calendars, but I think it's being flexible as well. So the idea of being live, being able to use data to adapt the plan, to cut things in different ways if it needs doing in that way. But those were the 4 things they came up with, and I think they're quite good ways of thinking about things when you start touching on the psychology.
So a question from the audience for Dan from Hixie. How are Carat currently measuring social media channels?
So within the UK we have a special team who measures. So for example, we use services like Sysomos and Radian 6, and we look at patterns within social media, but then we also try to correlate that with other patterns within other sorts of data. So for a couple of clients we found, or for one client, we found a correlation between sentiment and purchase. So when there was bad sentiment, purchase levels went down. This was a very sort of customer service driven company. So what they found was that when sentiment, as you could measure it on Facebook and Twitter, went down about this company, with people saying, just got terrible service from X and things, then sales went down. But if you could reverse the sentiment, then sales wouldn't go down, or sales would actually go up. So what we enabled them to do was to actually, so that was an absolute solid reason to engage with social media, and where people are saying bad things, try to counter them or try to mollify them or try to, later on make them say nice things. And there was another case where we found that there was a correlation. So this is a client who sells online, and there was a correlation between the number of shares and the sales volume. So, tracked over several months, when the number of shares went up, the sales volume went up. When the number of sales went down, when the number of shares went down, sales volume went down. So we measure social media I think in a very sophisticated way, but also we correlate it and we use other statistical techniques to link it to other sorts of data that the client has.
Marvellous, thank you. So just changing skew ever so slightly, how do traditional media owners manage this revolution of online content and sharing of it and its distribution? And who does it, and at the moment, who does it well? Who leads in that space? Who needs to catch up? And what should they do if they do need to catch up? So that question there, Dara.
I think it goes back to the point, the content question earlier on. There are kind of 2 schools of thought here, and none of these are YouTube school of thought. I'm just saying there's 2 schools of thoughts within traditional media owners. Is that the content that they own is proprietary, it's theirs, and if the user wants to access it, they should either A, pay for it, or B, at bare minimum, visit their website or watch their TV channel to see it. The second school of thought is the user doesn't care who owns it, they're interested in the content. And I think, you know, I don't think necessarily neither are right or wrong. You know, they're very black and white scenarios, and obviously, inevitably, there's a huge amount of grey in here. But I think that, so what Channel 4 have done for a very long time is they've gone with the latter, that actually, but what they've done is they've been very clever as well, because they've spent a lot of time building their 4OD brand, but at the same time syndicated a lot of their content across platform, whether that's YouTube, as well as Seesaw, iPad, PlayStation, etc., etc. And they get into revenue share models with all those partners. So I think what has worked very well for them is that they, as I say, they have that syndicated content, but also they've got a strong brand. I think that it's slightly different for publishers, whereby you might go onto the Mail website, which is obviously absolutely enormous, because you want to read stuff in the Daily Mail or, you know, on the Mail Online. You don't necessarily know of articles that are out there which are specifically in the Mail, and going to search for them, you know, there's a loyalty to that site. The likes of ITV typically have had, you know, a lot of proprietary around their own product, but even what they're doing, I think, very well, is they're using the likes of YouTube and other social networks as a community mechanic. So they offered, for Britain's Got Talent, the opportunity for people to upload their auditions to YouTube, for people to vote on it, and that worked very well. So I think that the beauty of it is that there's a spectrum of stuff you can do. I think the wise, you know, look, change is going to happen, isn't it? It's whether or not you embrace it, or you know, you're afraid of it and try to resist it. So I think that the clever things to do is to protect your own brand, but capitalise on what is out there to really enhance it.
And Martin, from a creative standpoint, who do you think does it particularly well?
Well, as a publisher, really well. I suppose it's just they're just cleverly using the technology, but whether that's going to financially pay out for them, I think we shall see. I mean, from a brand perspective, creative perspective, we try and get brands to think in a transmedia way, I suppose, call it, which is another fine word, but the idea that rather than necessarily try and give your content in all different shapes and sizes depending on what media people are looking at it, so you're just squeezing big content into small screens or whatever, you're actually thinking what is the right content for that right device at that right moment for that right person, so you can tell your brand story in lots of different ways. Some people need to pay for and some people don't, and I think that laddering up of using the interaction for what it's best at is something I think a lot of companies need to look at and think about their user scenarios when they're actually engaged in looking at their content on what particular device, and I think that'll lead to some quite good conclusions, I think.
But I think as well you can turn that question around almost. So where you're seeing more and more people employing community managers, either on the client side or within agencies, you always get that question of what's the community manager going to talk about today or this month, or where are they going to get the content from to populate the website, the page, the channel, and everything else. So there are kind of three ways you can do it. So the first one is working around campaigns. So we might work with producers or developers to build supplementary content and experience around an ad like the Beckham ad or anything else. The second one is you work with a client to try and discover content that exists that either nobody knows about or no one's considered as content. So that might be from a product experience, it might be from experts within the company. One of the big things I think you're seeing archive content being brought back to life. We found this in the archive, we thought you'd find it interesting. And I think the final point is the idea of working with publishers. So publishers and partners to produce content, to populate our channels, to work within our campaigns and things like that. So you need expert people in terms of project managers and people who kind of really get the process. but it's something I think media owners have a really valuable role to play in partnering with agencies and clients to produce content that can populate these sort of areas and drive these campaigns.
I think film companies are getting to be really good at it as well. I mean, if you look at the case studies around what happened with the Hunger Games, where you took the first film from a series of books, and that had one of the biggest opening weekends ever in the States when that opened, and they'd effectively been doing a content campaign for the last year in seeding things into different communities and getting people interested in the cast and the story and the events and things like that. And so that was really good. But also, the other thing is, because I think most of us in this room aren't particularly target market for Hunger Games, a lot of us probably had no idea it was going on. So it was just incredibly well targeted. And then also, if you look at what's happening with Avengers Assemble, which opens today, they did a really good thing with a billboard in East London, where you had graffiti artists live creating a billboard with the different superheroes in the film, and people could vote for which one they should add to the mural next, which is really good. And there's a really good there's a Twitter stunt coming, I think, over the weekend during Homeland, I think, on Sunday, which should be quite good as well. But just creating new content around the content that you've got out there already.
So just last couple of questions before we draw to a close. Yes, please.
Hi, Perry from Harvey's, the furniture store. I'm just, rather than a specific question to do with data analysis, it's more of a brand question. Other than Old Spice, what are the brands out there that have drove reinvigorated their brand through content?
So I've got, I'd say countless, but you think there are a variety that have done, so Tipex. Tipex have done 2 campaigns with us that have done phenomenally well. I don't know who signed them off, and I don't really know how competitive the liquid correction market is. And in fact, I couldn't name another brand but Tipex within that. But I also would know that it's, quite a boring, market. But they did, they launched a campaign, an interactive campaign on YouTube, which, led to something like 350%. I mean, I'm making these numbers up, but they are around this number. 350% uplift in sales, brand awareness, etc., etc. There are other campaigns that, again, when people think of this, I think you make a good point, is that reinvigorating a brand. I think if you expand that point, is what brands are being involved that you wouldn't typically think of. No one's really surprised if a car or an alcohol or a film does something exciting and wacky. But we had Siemens developed a channel now. Siemens are, again, very B2B focused, and they have a huge amount of products and services. Probably everyone in this room would be able to identify 5% of them, but they were kind of showcasing in a very neat way how you can link to each one or the other, whether it's something very, very serious like medical care to something far more kind of consumer electronic based. And I think one to kind of bear in mind, which isn't necessarily reinvigoration, but something that's really grasped the whole area very well, is T-Mobile, where they were very much ahead of the curve. At the beginning, using social media at the very heart of their campaigns rather than a bolt-on, and now launching on social media. So it's not necessarily a reinvigoration with them. However, probably among the big 4 telcos, T-Mobile had the, I suppose, and I don't want to upset anyone, but the worst rep, I suppose. But within their younger audiences, the results have been unbelievable.
I think the brands also, particularly if you think product brands, those who are able to raise the story about their brand above product level and talk more at a sort of brand level. And there's some examples have been around for a while. People like Dove, Real Beauty, I suppose it raised the issue. It wasn't just about soap, it was about a bigger, the world will be a better place if people felt more confident about themselves. They answered some big questions there, and they raised their brand to a bigger level of discussion. Or Persil with its dirt is good. I thought that was a really clever way of, it's a washing powder. How interesting is that? Not very, but suddenly it's this whole thing about letting your kids play outside and get dirty, which is sort of quite an emotionally engaging idea. So I think those who are able to raise that to that level, to sort of make it campaignable, I think they're the ones who seem to do a good job at invigorating their brand, even quite dull brands.
Any other final thoughts from the panel on brands that you think have done that particularly well, really reinvigorated their brand? No. So one final question, just from the lady at the back.
Hi, Kirsty Wiley from Wall Street Journal. And we've talked a lot about relevancy, target market, and those sort of buzzwords. We're targeting a much older C-suite audience who aren't notorious for sharing or social. How would you say we can encourage them to be more interactive and use social media more? That sort of audience. That's to anybody.
Dan, would you like to take that?
Well, I'd say that there's certainly core pockets among those people who do, who do share a lot, who use Twitter a lot, who use things like LinkedIn as well. But I think it's the same. It's really the list of 4 things that Nick gave, that you need to create something, or there needs to be some sort of idea that makes them want to share. Because everybody grows up sharing things and talking to friends and making recommendations and things. And it may simply be that the content that's being created at the moment isn't appealing, isn't touching their buttons in terms of things that they positively want to share with other people. One example of sharing I really love is that there's a BBC online story from about 10 years ago now about how scientists discovered that Guinness is good for you. And this story just gets reinvigorated about once or twice a year. This will sort of go up within the most popular content on the BBC news site that day. And it's because somebody has discovered it and linked it to this thing, hey, guess what, Guinness is actually good for you, which relates to an old paid media slogan. And then it just, because people want to believe it and they probably haven't seen the story before, and they're like, that's interesting. So it's those sorts of things that will make people share. But I don't think I think it's about the content really, and also just making it as easy as possible to share and as appropriate to the networks that they're using.
I think that's a really good point. Well, maybe I could just pick up. We work in the pharmaceutical industry quite a bit, where it's a very particular industry. There are very clear specialities. There's only so many things a particular type of oncologist wants to talk about and who they want to talk about. It's quite a niche community, and I think we don't always need to think in terms of YouTubes and Facebooks and Twitters. We can think of niche communities and maybe build it around topics and content that they're particularly interested in. So, for instance, we built a mobile environment that people could use when they go to conferences around the world, and if they're going to an oncology conference in Milan or in Chicago, wherever it might be, they're able to network with each other and their peers and share content that's been released at these congresses that's really relevant, and they understand it better through the discussion and through the debate that happened in that comfortable community of people they sort of half knew already but hadn't necessarily connected with. And I think there's a big place to play for niche communities as well as the big platforms as well.
Actually, sorry, one more thing for me, and also don't forget email for C-suite, because they might not have a Facebook account or they might not have a Twitter account, but they'll definitely have an email address, and their friends will as well.
I think just from my point, I think it's a very good question. I think from what we found is that they are sharing, they're just not doing it so obviously. I think when people think sharing with the word social media, first thing you think of is Facebook, and then Twitter and blah 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 blah. But actually, Dan mentions LinkedIn. I was at a B2B conference where they were all asked, what is the biggest social media site, and it was hands down they were putting LinkedIn. But I think there's a lot of content out there that they're watching that's targeted at them, and it is niche or broad. So like TED Talks, for example, do incredibly well within that kind of A/B C-suite category. Also, a lot of industries now are really embracing that. With us, for example, BP, when they had the oil crisis off the coast of Florida, they had the CEO or some senior people addressing concerns on YouTube with video and talking to the dialogue. And although it was a very negative event, it was a reputation management piece, and the ratings that they were getting were something like 4.5 out of 5. So although people were like, this is disgusting, you're ruining the earth, blah, I want to kill you, it's more about, but we really respect what you're doing here. Same thing with BA when Willie Walsh did a video piece when he was addressing people over the Unite, strike, that vast majority of people hated here and they couldn't understand it. It really social media allows C-suite companies to really embrace and develop a dialogue with the consumers that are trying to interact with.
I think there are some. So I agree with pretty much everything that's been said, but I think there are some principles as well to think about. So it wasn't that long ago that we were training journalists to think in terms of SEO and how to start writing differently so that search engines would pick things up. I think there's still an element of being first with the story, having the exclusive, anything like that obviously helps. But on top of that, you've got to think about, I think, devices. So those people will be using, my guess would be, off the top of my head, different types of devices at different times of day than teenagers when they're sharing through Facebook or Twitter. So having a device strategy, having strategy around editorial will help, and obviously making it easy to share with people, whether that's through LinkedIn, whether it's through email, whether it's through corporate networks, or even kind of devices that they might be holding on the move.
Great. So we'll draw the debate to a close. We're just slightly over time. First, I'd like to thank all the speakers today, and particularly our panellists, so please give them a round of applause. I'd like to welcome you all to just stay and to share a drink with us after the event. Please don't rush off if you have time. And finally, just to thank every one of you for coming, and hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, sure.